Welcome to Notepad. I'm your host, Ibrahim Sani. This is a very interesting moment, not just because this is the much-awaited budget. This is, of course, the first time I'm doing Notepad this year from my home. Tengok tu, dah jauh kita pergi, and yet we are still doing this virtually. The reason is because I've been up since 6 a.m. and I've been covering the news of budget since the morning on AWANI. We've been covering this at length. Talking about the expectations of the budget with a whole host of our guests. Many of them, in fact, suspected some of the things that have been mentioned by the finance minister. So let's get right on it, largely because the finance minister, Tunku Datuk Sri Zafrul Tunku Abdul Aziz, has tabled budget 2023. And of course, announcing an allocation of 372.3 billion ringgit. This represents a 40.2 billion ringgit increase compared to the 332.1 billion ringgit allocated for budget 2022. Around 272.3 billion ringgit has been allocated for operational expenditure and 95 billion ringgit for development. The top three recipients of budget 2023 are the Finance Ministry at 67.2 billion ringgit, the Education Ministry at 55.6 billion ringgit, and the Health Ministry at 36.1 billion ringgit. According to the Finance Minister, this constituted 43.3% of the total expenditure. I want to also highlight a key point, something that will affect me directly, of course, because of the narrow tax base that we already have. We want to understand a bit better about how those earning between 50,000 and 100,000 ringgit a year will have their income tax slashed by 2 percentage points. This will benefit, according to the Finance Minister, over 1 million people in the M40 income group. For the taxable income range of 50,000 to 70,000 ringgit, the rate will be reduced from 13% to 11%. Those in the taxable income bracket of 70,000 to 100,000 ringgit, meanwhile, will see a tax cut from 21% to 19%. While those in the taxable income range between 250,000 to 600,000 will be subjected to a rate of 25%. The measures would allow tax savings of up to 1,000 ringgit for the middle income group and 250 ringgit for the high income group. Additionally, those earning below 100,000 ringgit a year will also be getting an e-wallet top-up of 100 ringgit next year.
For the taxable income range of 50,000 ringgit to 70,000 ringgit, the rate will be reduced from 13% to 11%. Those in the taxable income bracket of 70,000 ringgit to 100,000 ringgit, meanwhile, will see a tax cut from 21% to 19%. While those in the taxable income range between 250,000 ringgit to 600,000 ringgit will be subject to a rate of 25%. The measures would allow tax savings of up to 1,000 ringgit for the middle income group and 250 ringgit for the high income group. Additionally, those earning below 100,000 ringgit per year will also be getting an e-wallet top-up of 100 ringgit next year.
So joining us virtually on the line, just like me, is Soh Lian Seng, the KPMG's head of tax. So, Mr. Soh, let's talk about some of the initial reactions you have following this budget. Of course, every budget is the biggest budget ever. This is consistent with that. But what was interesting was the announcement of the 95 billion ringgit budget for CAPEX instead of OPEX, something that we don't normally see often. Development expenditure normally ranges between 50 to 60 billion ringgit. One can argue, in fact, some of the opposition MPs have argued that this is indeed an election budget. What are your initial thoughts from this?
Yeah, Ibrahim, thank you. I think my first action in terms of this budget, I can only say, wow, because the wow effect is that it shows that the government's commitment in terms of caring for Raya and, of course, the projects that they are proposing for the sustainability of the economy, and the last part is on the services of the government agency. So that would be my first reaction, Ibrahim.
We're also going to be exploring some of the ways on how the budget is going to impact the M40 group, the group that don't normally see goodies being handed out to them. Do you feel that the income tax cut is actually a way for the government to actually increase the disposable income for this particular income segment?
Yes, Ibrahim. I look at it, this group of M40, if you were to compare to the past budget, they have been left behind, actually. And focus has been more on the B40 in the past and also for this budget. So I look at it, yes, now they take care of the M40 group as well. So the group of M40 will have more disposable income to spend. And that would definitely help to spur the economy.
So we need to look at the ability for the government to finance this budget. We're looking at 370 plus billion ringgit. We're looking at a 95 billion ringgit a debt that the government might have to incur in order to support this budget. Where do you think this is going to impact our household income debt? We're looking at a 5.5% GDP deficit. Are these good indicators to think about?
Yeah. On this matter, if you look at it, my view here is I think every household, if I were to take it as an example, the rule of thumb that you may have borrowing to actually support your spending. If you look at this budget, if you look at it, I think it's approximately about 26%, talking about funding from the borrowing, and the balance of 70 to 73 come from taxes in order to support this. Now, for long term, the government, it's the government's challenge that they need to look at how they're going to support this. If the current position still continues, you would definitely may have some concern. So because this year, if you look at it, there's also no major tax reform has been announced this year. Yeah. So on that perspective, if you look at for future sustainability of the government income, there is a need and for the government to think of new taxes to come in. Yeah.
Are you talking about GST? So is that what you're looking at right now?
Well, this is something that even before the budget, people have been speculating the reintroduction of the GST, and I would not deny that there's a possibility that one day the government really need to look into that aspect to reintroduce the GST to support the government's coffer in terms of that. Yeah.
Okay, so the government project revenue collection to be at 273 billion ringgit compared to this year, 2022, revised revenue projection of 285 billion ringgit. So this is a drop in revenue from 285 this year to 273 next year. And of course, we're looking at a very narrow tax base. And within that, we're seeing 2 percentage points on some brackets. And we're looking at even further revenue collection reduction in the income tax segment. Do you feel that SST is no longer sustainable to support this kind of budget?
Yeah, but before that, if you mentioned about the 2-point reduction, say for the personal tax, that is also at the same time there's a 0.5% increase at the higher bracket. So if you look at that, that itself may neutralize, in terms of the collection and also the reduction of the penalty. If you're coming back to the collection of taxes that may reduce in terms of that, I would say if in the long run continue in this model, SST may not be sufficient to support that. Yeah.
I know neither of us are political pundits here, but do you feel, this is a gut feel, yeah? I'm not asking about KPMG's house view, but do you feel that SST is very near its the days of SST is ending, and GST has to be introduced even as early as next year?
If you look at the preparation, even for GST 1.0, for that reason, government need to provide sufficient preparation time. So to mention that whether GST can be implemented next year, the government allows some kind of period for them to actually prepare themselves. If you were to take, assuming 1st of April 2023, my view that is too short of a time for businesses to prepare themselves. If GST were to come back, I think the appropriate kind of a timeline should be given approximately 12 months from now for businesses to prepare themselves for the GST.
Okay. Soh Lian Seng of KPMG's Head of Tax, we'll pause for now. We'll go for a short break before we continue our conversation with KPMG.
Ingin bersorak di perlawanan bola sepak terhebat? Kini anda boleh dengan 100 Plus. Jom bola dengan 100 Plus serta Ila sekarang.
Kemungkinan tanpa had menanti apabila anda dikuasakan oleh jalur lebar Unify Home. Selami emosi dan rasai keterujaannya. Dengan Unify Mobile, setiap detik pasti tidak akan terlepas. Serta kongsi kegembiraan dengan mereka yang amat bermakna. Nikmati 100,000 jam hiburan pilihan anda. Unify duniamu bila-bila masa di mana-mana sahaja. Unify.
And thanks for staying on with us. This is Notepad live from my house, the comfort of my home, just like yourselves here right now, watching the very long-awaited Budget 2023. We have KPMG Head of Tax on the line, but for now, we want to explore a little bit more about how this is impacting the rakyat. Earlier on, we covered on the impact on GST, SST, and other forms of taxation, and the narrow base tax that we already have, and how the government is going to support this particular budget. But for now, let's take a look into the 1 billion ringgit that is to be allocated to the Keluarga Malaysia Hardcore Poverty Eradication Program from 2023. Teguh Zafrul said that this will see economic opportunities given to some 50,000 hardcore poor households in the country.
Program ini akan menyediakan peluang ekonomi kepada lebih 50,000 isi rumah miskin tegar bagi meningkatkan pendapatannya, antaranya menerusi projek pertanian serta usahawanan produk dan perkhidmatan. Bantuan yang diberikan termasuklah latihan, modal permulaan, insentif pertanian, pemasaran dan pendigitalan. Diharapkan usaha ini dapat meningkatkan pendapatan isi rumah miskin tegar supaya melepasi pendapatan garis kemiskinan makanan.
All right, we bring back Soh Lian Seng, Head of Tax for KPMG. So, let's go through with some of the highlights of the goodies that is being introduced in this budget. How do you think this will impact not just the hardcore poor, but of course the B40 group? One item that I find very interesting was the continuation of the 50 ringgit transportation, resulting in the government subsidizing about 150 ringgit transportation cost for the people. Also, ASB ceiling could be increased from 200,000 to 300,000. How do you think this will impact not just the way the B40 and the M40 spending, but perhaps on how the majority of Malaysians think about investments in the long run?
Yeah, I think when the government introduced some of these subsidies and all that, it definitely encouraged individual and all that to look and venture into all this new investment in terms of that. But from my perspective, when I look at perhaps the growth from the perspective of the company, for example, or the industry, it's very interesting that I know that the government is trying to bring it back the hotel industry, hotel and tourism industry. I noted that the government has introduced the reinvestment allowance for those tourism projects and tourism projects. So that itself will then allow the industry to reinvest and grow that particular business. The other one that I look at is also the medical industry, where the government has extended some of the incentives and even continue to provide the exemption to the manufacturer of the pharmaceuticals. And this is following after the pandemic. This actually is a very good testament that the government is serious and looking at the growth of this particular area. Of course, when we look at also the angle of renewable energy for that reason, if you notice, the government has also extended the incentive of the green technology, the green GITA, and also the green income tax exemption, and also providing some kind of the EV development. With these incentives and with these proposed incentives the government is introducing, I would say the respective industry should take this opportunity and focus in terms of the growth of their business. Not forgetting, of course, the government is also trying to promote automation, digitalization, in particular the SMEs group. We also can see that the government has actually proposed a reduction of the income tax rate for the first 100,000 from 17% to 15%. Of course, those chargeable income of more than 100 to 600,000, it remains at 17, and anything above the 600,000, it will tax at 24%. Yeah. So Ibrahim, so this what I see that yes, definitely will encourage more investment into this respective sector.
Also, some of the specifics so that I can perhaps add on is that there will be a 25 million ringgit allocation to allow for Keluarga Malaysia to continue on visiting their or doing the travels for domestic destinations. Another area of interest would be the 200 million to allow for the promotion and the marketing of the travel sector or travel industry, and a 15% tax cut for micro SMEs. Do you feel that these kind of allocation is going to go down all the way to the micro SMEs, the sole proprietors, for instance, and perhaps boost the economy from the bottom up?
My view is yes, it will encourage and also boost the economy all the way. That's definitely because looking at that particular impact and also the allocation of this fund, it is a good starting point for this industry to come in and play their part in terms of that. Yep.
Okay, fantastic. One more short break before we conclude our conversation with the head of tax of KPMG.
Inspirasi alam semula jadi menjadi pilihan agar idea saya sentiasa segar. Ditemani teh hijau boh Kini saya terinspirasi. Teh hijau boh, ada boh, ada
Pasir Gudang Johor. Kita jumpa minggu depan.
Sudahkah anda bersedia?
Ramai yang sambut aku keluar.
Siapa yang akan diundang?
Boleh belikan oven baru tak?
Kenapa?
Untuk cairkan hati saya yang dah lama beku. Ya.
Dan siapa cameo yang dibawa?
Macam mana dengan keadaan isteri saya, doktor? Ada benda kelakar ke?
Sepatu Reunion Live Tour di Astro Warna dan Astro Go.
So we continue on our conversation with Budget 2023 as we explore the budget even further over the weekend. And of course, there's going to be a lot of analysis and understanding about what this budget means for the people. When asked about the fit of Budget 2023 in the event that the Parliament dissolves before the bill is passed, Tengku Zafrul reference to the precedent set before. Now, in 1999, former Premier Tun Dr. Mahathir Mohamad, who was then Prime Minister, sought the dissolution of the Parliament shortly after tabling the budget in the Budget 2000 presentation back in November that year. And of course, and his finance minister was forced to table another one at the end of February 2000, around 3 months later after Barisan Nasional prevailed. So when asked, this was Tengku Zafrul's comment.
This has happened before in the year 1999. So if you refer back to what happened in 1999, there was a budget was presented. There was a dissolution in 1999. Then the budget was then presented again. So that was what will happen if there is a dissolution. But again, that question should be posed to the Prime Minister.
So Soh Lian Seng, KPMG Head of Tax, joins us. So do you think that this could be considered as an election budget? And do you feel that the dissolution could be a reality? And if so, what would be the impact or the implication of it as a tax analyst like yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Ibrahim. When we look at it, 2023 will be the last year that we need to hold an election. So, like it or not, then, of course, this is the last year to have this budget. So, there are a lot of people out there saying that this is the election budget. From my perspective, when you look at the introduction and also the subsidy that the government is giving, I would say this is more on the people-centric budget, if you look at it. The care the government has for the rakyat. So that is where the budget for the people, for the business community, as well as to sustain the economy. Now, your question, Ibrahim, what happened if this election is going to come? I think like what the Zafrul just has mentioned, if you were to refer to 1999, it means that before this budget is being tabled and approved in the Parliament, then there will be a need to retable this particular budget. That is yet to be seen, whether there will be a reality or not. Ibrahim?
Of course, one other area of concern has always been on the execution, the implementation, and the monitoring of the allocated budget to the people through the ministries and many other governmental agencies. Would this be an area of interest for someone like KPMG or an institution like KPMG to monitor? Do you feel that the time is right for us to see better transparency in terms of how the budget is being executed?
To promote transparency, I think this is a good practice. And with that transparency, then perhaps the understanding of how the budget is being drafted, being designed, that definitely will help. Yeah. If you look at from now until the time when the budget is come, it is in the interest of everyone to monitor as well as to see how some of this allocation is effectively being allocated. Because as far as the establishing of budget is concerned, it is very important to see when the government propose some of the incentives, some of the allocations. Yes, it is very important. We also need to observe how this allocation and implementation is being effected. Ibrahim?
Do you feel that the political situation in the country is going to impact how transparency is going to be seen? Do you feel that the MPs have the capacity to ensure that the government executes the budget in the best manner possible?
I would say that this is an important element, and with our political situation, in this situation, of course, we always hope for the improvement, the betterment of the transparency that every government can uphold. And I also think that every government will do its best and improve, and over time, over what has been practiced. So if it's the current position, I think it's very important to focus on how they are going to implement this budget they have put forward. That is what I observe.
Final comment, Lian Seng, on the budget before we conclude our conversation.
Thank you. I look at it for this budget, very important to see how commitment the government is to help the rakyat. They care for the rakyat, and also those initiatives that they are proposing to sustain the economy. These are all good initiatives. But very important is also to see for future sustainability what kind of tax reform the government would need to think about for the immediate future. Yeah. Ibrahim?
Thank you very much for that. That was Soh Lian Seng, KPMG's head of tax. Now, what's going to happen over the next few days is that we're going to be continuing our coverage on Budget 2023 and also exploring some of the elements on the deeper implication of the budget impacting certain sectors, at least sectors that I continuously talk about on this show. Namely the startup sector, the SME sector, the investment sector, how Petronas, for instance, is going to continue to deliver the dividends that the government needs, and also how the government is going to manage that 95 billion or 97 billion debt. These are all going to be explored over the next few days. Now, I will not rest until we explore as much as possible on these items. But having said that, we are also quite relieved that the budget has indeed been presented. Now, if you want to learn more about this kind of information, please head out to my social media at Ibrahim Sani Net on IG or on Twitter to find out more about what these conversations need to be had. Just find out more there as well. Now, that's it for me. It's a Friday night. I'm going to enjoy my Friday night with my kids. For now, this is Ibrahim Sani signing off for AWANI.